Right. Before I answer your question, I would like to thank you for inviting me to this interview, and also a message from Iranian workers. Let me just pass this message. Greeting and thanks for the invitation. Also, workers in Iran declare their solidarity with workers in the United States, Argentina, Brazil, to all workers in the world. The workers are only leading class, I believe, in the soul who, with their unity, will destroy the power of capitalism ruled by barbarism, I believe. To answer your question, let me just start with explaining the economic situation in Iran first. Then we go from there to other issues. Starting with the misery index in 2019, the economic growth in Iran, which was reported by IMF, it shows in 2019 misery index in Iran is 59%, nearly hit an appalling level of 60% in Iran. According to the International Monetary Fund, IMF, as I said, in 2019, Iran growth turned negative, falling as low as minus 9.5%, illustrating the depth in the economic and social crisis in Iran, I would say. The GDP growth in Iran in 2019, which was published on October 18, determined that Iran is struggling with one of the deepest economic recession in its history, and that Iran's real gross GDP growth for this year is minus, as I mentioned earlier, minus 9.5%. An unprecedented level over the 31 years. Over the last year, 1/10 of Iranian economy simply just disappeared. The average GDP growth rate for all countries in the world in 2019 was 3%. Seen from this perspective, Iran's economy shrunk by a 12.5% compared to the world. And also the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, monthly report shows that October 2019, the volume of Iran's oil production was 2.1 million barrels a day, the lowest it has been over the last 40 years. Even if compared to production during 1988 war between Iran and Iraq, after the nuclear treaty took effect, Iran's oil production suppressed 3.8 million barrels a day. Today, by the new threat by Trump administration, the production of the oil is only 300 barrels a day. And as you know, Iran's economy at least a high percentage dependence on oil production. So can the trend be reversed in Iran? The simple answer to this is yes, if it can, on paper. if Iran's oil production returned to the level of 2 years ago, Iran's GDP would grow by 9%, as it was before. In the real world, the situation is more complicated. First of all, there is no sign that international tension are subsiding or that the sanction will be lifted off anytime soon. Secondly, even if the sanctions are lifted, the economy will not immediately snap back to the way it was before. After the nuclear agreement went into the effect, it took about a year for the oil production to return to the ceiling of 3.8 million barrels a day. It is reasonable to assume that this time it would be taken even longer, because after their recent experience, Iran's oil customers would be doubly cautious about returning to the market. As the saying goes, once bitten, twice shy. So if we look at the employment and unemployment in Iran, the latest official statistic from Iran shows that during the Iranian calendar year, 1397, March 2018 to March 2019, there were 23.8 million employed people in the country. National-wide rate of unemployment stood at 12%. This is again official number they're giving. And the participation rate, the sum of the employed workers divided by the working age population, reached 40.5%. Around 57 million people who live under the poverty line. These 57 million are those that are Iranian, based on the Iranian Research Center, believe will fall under the poverty line over the course of a 1913 Iranian calendar, 1398-99. That means 2019-2020. Minimum wage in Iran last year increased by 21%. Started in March 2020. After three-time failing meeting, workers from trade union, they call themselves trade union, but they are not, belonging to the fraction of the government, they decided to increase the salary by, or minimum wages from last year. So the minimum wages is 15.5 million riyals, which is $94 per month. 18.34 million riyals, or $113 a year. That's the salary basic minimum wages in Iran. $113. But compared to the food prices and inflation and everything, that 10 times under the poverty line. So they set workers' monthly allowance as 4 million riyals, again, to help, but that is like $24.8 a month. If we go to other side, a political side, the rampant corruption in Islamic regime, if you look at this way, the Islamic regime of Iran thinks that it could weather the storm using the Trump administration's reimposition of creeping sanctions on the Iranian economy to divert the attention of mass and rally them behind it against the imperialism. This has been the key strategy of the regime since the inspection. But while the sanctions have certainly had an effect on certain layers, in particular upper middle class, the vast majority of poor and working people are in desperate situation. At the same time, the rampant corruption and the greed at the top of the regime have alienated even the most loyal of its supporters.
¿Quisieras agregar algo más?
I would say capitalism in Iran is at its dead end. Capitalism cannot tolerate the demands of the working class or their independent organizations. Iran's economy is running on minimal capacity, isolated from the world market, which itself is in deep economic crisis.